The defeat of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer at the Battle of the Little Bighorn continues to be a debated subject among historians. Common narratives often portray Custer as an ambitious egotist with aspirations for the presidency, attributing his personal shortcomings to the tragedy that unfolded in Montana. However, this portrayal is overly reductive and overlooks the intricacies of the circumstances. Many regarded Custer as a competent officer, with some historians asserting that he played a significant role in pivotal moments during the Battle of Gettysburg. This claim indicates a level of skill that contradicts the notion of a man solely motivated by hubris and delusion. Even years after the battle, numerous military professionals supported the decisions Custer made on that critical day in 1876. During visits to the Custer battlefield in the 1960s, West Point cadets examined the context of Custer's choices, with a consensus among military personnel that they would have acted similarly. This viewpoint challenges the dominant narrative of Custer as a reckless leader who committed a series of grave mistakes. To comprehend Custer's defeat, it is essential to adopt a multifaceted perspective, taking into account the strategic environment, the capabilities of his troops, and the underestimation of his opponents. What were the fundamental factors that contributed to Custer's downfall? Firstly, were the Native Americans genuinely better equipped, or is that a misconception? Secondly, did a white individual actually fight alongside the Native Americans while disguised as one of them? Lastly, what factors made it so difficult to identify the Native Americans during the battle? I consulted my esteemed colleague, Paul Andrew Hutton, who has devoted his career to studying this conflict. I shared my observations from the West Point ride-along, where cadets and military enthusiasts unanimously endorsed Custer's strategy and sought his insights on the issue. His observations were quite enlightening. He recognized that although Custer followed military protocols, his natural inclination for boldness resulted in a significant error. He fragmented his forces without a comprehensive understanding of the scale of the Native American encampment, which is now acknowledged as one of the largest in Western military history, accommodating at least 10,000 individuals. Custer's daring nature had previously proven advantageous, as demonstrated by his decisive maneuvers at Gettysburg, where he acted autonomously without awaiting orders. However, his choice to divide his command was worsened when he instructed Reno to attack the village, while he sought an alternative route across the river, improvising as he proceeded. He erroneously believed that his subordinates would offer the necessary support. As is widely known, Reno faced intense opposition and was compelled to retreat to the river, leading to disorder and a struggle for survival among his men. Unaware of these developments, Custer found himself operating without vital information as he attempted to cross the river. Regrettably, his subordinates consistently fell short of his expectations during critical moments. During the subsequent inquiry into the incident, both Reno and Banteen testified that they did not hear any gunfire from Custer's location. In contrast, all other witnesses who provided testimony stated that they could indeed hear the gunfire, but did not take any action in response. This inconsistency posed a significant problem, further complicated by additional factors that will be addressed shortly. At the time of the assault, U.S. troops were armed with Springfield single-shot rifles. While this may seem inadequate by contemporary standards, the rationale behind this choice was not without merit, as cavalry units did not engage in combat while mounted during that period. Instead, the soldiers would approach the battle area, dismounting 3 of their number while 1 remained behind with the horses in a safe location. The dismounted soldiers would then disperse to leverage their superior firepower, as the Springfields had an effective range of approximately 600 yards. This advantage enabled them to fend off the attackers during the first hour of the engagement. In contrast, the Native Americans were equipped with 1873 Winchesters, which had a range of only about 200 yards. On a traditional battlefield where tall grass was absent, the Springfields would likely prevail, especially with a well-organized line of soldiers. However, on that particular day in Montana, the tall grass provided concealment for the Native Americans, allowing them to approach the soldiers quietly and eliminate them individually, sometimes resorting to hand-to-hand combat. Visiting the battlefield offers a deep insight into this dynamic. One of the most notable elements of this conflict is the imagery perpetuated by Hollywood, which depicts Native Americans dressed in traditional garments such as moccasins, buckskin, and ornate war bonnets, as one might expect during a clash with the U.S. cavalry. This representation is consistently echoed in films. However, prior to the 1873 battle, Custer had an encounter with hostile forces along the Yellowstone River, where he expressed in a written report his frustration regarding the difficulty of distinguishing friends from foes. This confusion stemmed from the War Department's provision of anglicized clothing to the Native Americans on the reservation. A historical image from that era shows men attired in clothing reminiscent of Brooks Brothers suits, complicating the dynamics of the battlefield. Consider the challenge of identifying an enemy who resembles a comrade. This factor had a significant impact on the battle's outcome. Furthermore, the Native Americans utilized strategies that included stealthily advancing towards soldiers. The first person would briefly stand up before swiftly crouching down. While the soldier focused on this initial threat, a second individual would then stand and take aim. Another contentious aspect of the confrontation pertained to the accounts from the men stationed on Reno Hill, many of whom lived through the encounter. Accounts were given regarding sharpshooters stationed on what is currently known as Sharpshooter Ridge, situated roughly 600 yards distant. It was revealed that these Native Americans had obtained rifles from Custer's forces and employed them against the soldiers, methodically aiming at the troops, mules, and horses. The troopers were misled into thinking that a rogue white individual was collaborating with the Native Americans, concealed in traditional clothing. Custer's predicament serves as a prime example of a traditional strategic pincer maneuver. However, he failed to execute it successfully. The forces moved into Medicine Tail Coulee, where, according to Mary Crawler, a beaver dam made the terrain almost untraversable. As a result, 3 officers lost their lives in that area, and for a period, it was thought that Custer had also met his end there. His remains were later moved back to the ridge, where he ultimately passed away. Although this idea has been rejected, it prompts an interesting inquiry. Could Custer's death have been affected by a beaver dam? While this concept may appear improbable if portrayed in a movie, it is, in fact, a true event. One notable facet of Custer's character was his boldness. During his relatively short yet distinguished career, he experienced the loss of 12 horses shot from under him in combat. In his last confrontation, he was mounted on his 13th horse, which also succumbed to gunfire, ultimately resulting in his own demise. This scenario exemplifies the saying that an individual's most significant strength may simultaneously serve as their most considerable weakness. Custer's audacity played a role in his fame, yet it ultimately resulted in his demise, with the number 13 representing his destiny. In his memoir, I Fought with Custer, Charlie Winhoff described sightings of white objects dispersed along the ridge to the north. As they brought their horses to a stop, they recognized that they were standing on the battlefield where Custer's luck had ultimately diminished. Winhoff survived until 1950, and in 1947, my esteemed friend Robert Utley had the chance to interview him while he was a young man working at the Little Bighorn battlefield. Fast forward to 2019, I had the honor of interviewing Robert Utley, bridging the gap between past and present as we explored the battle and the experiences of its survivors.